Now moving on to task number 6, we're going to stop R2 from advertising a default route first of all that we configured previously. This is because we're about to turn an area 1 into a stub area. And this is where it says right here, configure R1 to advertise an additional default route into area 1, but do not use the default information originate or route summarization. Okay, so let's start off with configuring or stopping a default route advertisement on R2. Let's do a show run IPv6 router OSPF, there you go, right here, and let's remove default route information originate. And let's hop to R3 and make sure when you do show IPv6 route OSPF, we no longer see a default route. Okay, now what we're going to do is to turn area 1 over here into a stub area, so R1 will advertise a default route along with all the other inter-area routes. Okay, so on R3, we do IPv6 router OSPF, and this has to be configured on both R3 and R1. They both have to agree upon being a stub area. And the command is area1 stub. As soon as you do that, it forces a reset on the neighbor, and then let's do area1 stub. Alright, now the adjacency is back up on R3. Let's do show IPv6 route OSPF. And here we see that before we had only 2 routes, now we have the third route, which is the default route that is advertised by the border router, which is R1 in this case, with the metrics of 11. So that's how the stub area looks, which is the inter-area routes with a single default route. Okay, the next task right here is said configure R1 so only default route is advertised into area 1. So that implies we're going to have to turn this stub area into a totally stub area. And the way to do that is under the IPv6 router OSPF1, instead of do an area 1 stub, do question mark and do a no summary. Actually, before we do that, I want to show you something first. Let's do show IPv6 OSPF database and take a look right here. You can see with the inter-area route or LSA type 3, we have a default route and then all other inter-area routes. Now let's do IPv6 router OSPF and turn that into a totally stub area with a no summary. And again, that has to be agreed upon between R1 and R3, so do a no summary on this side as well. And now if you do a show IP route OSPF, all the R3 is seeing or it has in the routing table is just the single default routes. Let's take a quick look at the database real quick. And here we have the same thing, except that we do no longer have any other routes in the database except for the default routes. Okay, so that is totally stub area. And obviously the R3 can use the default route, which is the only route it has right now, to ping, for example, R2 loopback interface. Okay, so that task number 6 with the stub area and totally stub area. Okay, so now we're going to move on to task number 7 with the redistribution and external summarization. First, we want to get rid of the stub area that we configured just now, and then we're going to advertise R3 loopback 1 through 3 using redistribution with the metrics value of 1 and metrics type 1. And the task requires us not to configure the metrics command in line with the redistribute command. Okay, so let's do the redistribution first. But before that, we need to do a little bit of a cleanup. So first we need to get rid of the stub area. So no area 1 stub. Same thing here, no area 1 stub. And then currently we are, I believe, advertising all the loopback interfaces with the regular OSPF command. So you can see loopback 1, actually loopback 0 through loopback 3. So we're going to need to stop that, since we're going to replace that with the redistribution. So no for loopback 1, loopback 2, and loopback 3. Okay, and then make sure on the R1 we no longer see any of those routes. Okay, here's R1, and as you can see, all the loopback 1 through 3 are gone, including the area summary route that we configured earlier, that right here that we had a null 0. Since R1 no longer has any of those routes, that's essentially removed the summary route from the routing table as well. Now let's start doing our redistribution. Actually, just to be safe, let's remove the area range command as well. Just to make sure it doesn't interfere with what we're about to do with the external route summarization. So let's remove that. Okay, and now back to router 3. Now we can perform the redistribution. We're going to use the IP prefix list, 3 loopback, permit. We're going to have to come up with the prefix list that includes all of these 3 subnets. Since it's contiguous and starting off with 0, going to 1 and 2, what we can do is 2013.000/62 and less than equal 64. Okay, and then we form a route map with connected routes, so we call it con to OSPF. Permit 10 with a match IPv6 address prefix list and that. And the task requires the route matrix to be 1 and the type to be 1. And we're not allowed to do that as part of the redistribute command, so we can do it right here under the route map with the set metric 1, and then we can do set matrix type 1. Okay, and then under IPv6 router OSPF1, this is where we perform the actual redistribution with the redistribute command from the connected with the route map of con to OSPF. And to check the prefix match, we just show IPv6 prefix list detail. And here looking for the R3 loopback, we already have 3 hits, which corresponds to 3 loopbacks that we match. Which means if we go to R1 right now and do show IPv6 router OSPF, we are seeing the 3 routes that we just redistributed into OSPF. Okay, now we go to R2. Oh, and note that it's a type 1, external type 1 as well, which means the metrics again will be cumulative along the way. So if we do show IPv6 route OSPF on R2, you can see now it's become a 662 for the metrics. And if you remember, we adjust the AD for the external routes to 115. You can see right here reflects right there as well. So I was trying to ping 2001.3.0.0.3. You can see that it's successful. 1 and 2 as well. So you can ping all 3 of the loopback from R2. Okay, next we look at the route summarization. So the task that configure is smallest summary routes on R3 to include R3 loopback 1, 2, 3 and advertise it to area 1. So we want to summarize it right at the edge where the redistribution occur. So right here as it enters R3. So to do that, get under the router, IPv6 router OSPF 1. The command is summary prefix. And the subnet mask, or the prefix itself, rather, it's going to be 2001.3.62, just like how we configure the prefix list to include all 3 loopbacks. Okay, and that's as small as it can go. Since we are including 3/64 subnet here, then enter. Do a show IPv6 route OSPF. You can see right here the summary route is enter into the routing table, pointing to a null 0. And now if we go back to R2, do up arrow, show IPv6 router OSPF, you can see instead of 3 separate external type 1 routes, we are seeing only a single external type 1 summary route. The metrics, however, remains pretty much the same, 662, and we should still be able to ping all of those loopbacks. Okay, so that's task number 7. Okay, next with task number 8, which is our final task of this lab, we're going to pretty much repeat what we did for the task number 6 with the stub area, but instead now that we're dealing with external route, instead of being a stub area, it will become a not-so-stubby area or NSSA. So the task say we want to configure R1 to advertise additional default route into area 1 and do not use default information originate or route summarization. So let's try that first. With R3 currently, we only have 3 routes. Now to enable not-so-stubby area, we get under IPv6. Again, R1 and R3 has to agree upon that, so we have to configure it first on R1 and then area 1. And just to show you now that we are dealing with or have a external routes inserted into area 1, if you're trying to do stub. Actually, I'm supposed to show you that on the R3, so let's take that out. I'll show you in a second here when we're done with R1. So for R1, let's go ahead and do area 1 NSSA for not-so-stubby area. And you can see there's some other options here, but for now, let's go ahead and enter that. And then going back to R3 with IPv6 router OSPF 1. And if you're trying to do what I meant to show you was area 1 stub, and you can see the command is now rejected by the router because R3 is considered itself as a autonomous system border router or SBR because there's a redistribution going on into area 1. What we need to do is instead of stub, it's going to be an SSA and to match the router 1 as well. But at this point, if you do show IPv6 route to OSPF on R3, you will see, unlike what we saw earlier with the stub area, we do not see a default route inserted into the area, or route R3 does not see a default route. And this is pretty much the default behavior of not-so-stubby area. So for the default route to be advertised by R1, what we need to do is to change or add the option at the end of the area 1 NSSA command with the default information originate, and then enter. And now if we hop back onto R3 and do a show command, you can see we have a ON2 type default route, ON being OSPF and NSSA, and 2 being external type 2. Okay, so that meets the requirement of our first tab of the task, which is just to advertise a default route in addition to any other routes. But next, we're going to configure R1 so that only default route is advertised into area 1. So essentially turn a regular NSSA into a totally not-so-stubby area, which is again equivalent to a totally stub area. Okay, the command to do that is very similar to what we saw earlier with the stub. So if you do question mark right here, we have a no summary. So to turn this into totally NSSA, we use the no summary option. It will do the same thing to match it on both sides with no summary. So now on router 3, we do show IPv6 route OSPF. You see here there's a default route that's being learned, while it allows all other routes they saw right here, which is the R1 loopback and then the point-to-point link between R1 and R2. And if you do show IPv6, let's take a look at the database real quick. And as you can see, now we have a type 7, okay, with the default route being type 7 as well as its own external summary route. And this is because in the NSSA, LSA type 5 is not allowed. That's why we don't see type 5 here in this database, but instead it uses the type 7. And you can see the type of the route has changed as well from the external route that we saw, or actually from the ON2 that we saw earlier, to just a regular inner area routes, which is OI right here. Okay, and R3 should still be able to ping pretty much everything else, starting off with R2 loopback 0, or even the other interfaces on R2. Or actually, we removed the default route advertisement from R2, that's why it can't reach it right now. The only thing, or the only interface it can reach is the loopback 0 on R2. Okay, the last command I want to show you is on R1, and that is show IPv6 OSPF border router. And this is to check what router that the R1 is seeing as a ASBR, which is currently showing up as only R3 with the router ID right here, .3. And it said R3 is being ASBR in area 1 of the fast Ethernet 00. Okay, just a quick command to check who's introducing the external route into the network. Although I don't think I got a chance to show you the LSA type 5 when we did the redistribution before we turned that into a NSSA. So let's do that real quick. Now R3, IPv6 router OSPF1. Then do no area 1 NSSA. And we're going to do that on both, basically removing it from NSSA, IPv6 router OSPF1. Alright, so hopefully we do show IPv6 route OSPF. We're back to, let's give it a second here. Okay, we're back to our external route with the summary. So I believe that should be enough for us to do a show IPv6 OSPF database. There you go. You can see right here now that we no longer in a stub or not so stubby area, and we're back to where we were with the redistribution with the summary. You can see the summary route 2001 3/62 is categorized as a LSA type 5. And I just want to show you the different types of LSA that shows up in the database. So now that we have completed all the tasks, that pretty much wraps up our video on IPv6 with OSPF version 3. You can visit our website to view an extensive list of our lab videos and sign up to get access to additional lab contents. Thank you for watching LabMinutes.com, and I'll see you guys in the next video.